All right, let's just cut the crap and dive right into this pile of glorious, I guess,
Yeah.
questionable faction choices we call the 1990s. You think you know the 90s.
I think a lot of people think they know the 90s.
Think again, buddy. We're going to rip through some seriously unexpected shit about the decade's hottest trends. From grunge to glam, hip-hop to that whole heroin chic thing, you know?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a pile. You know, the 90s had some, definitely some iconic moments.
Yeah, we'll get to the good stuff, don't you worry. But first, we got to dissect this fashion autopsy, right? Yeah. You sent over a Wikipedia article and some other sources on 90s fashion. So let's unpack it all, starting with those supermodels. What's the deal with those women? They were plastered everywhere back then.
Yeah, so these weren't your, like, you know, average pretty faces. I mean, these supermodels were megastars, bigger than some movie stars at the time.
Right.
The big five, right? Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Linda, and Tatjana, they were like, I don't know, royalty.
Yeah, then Kate Moss shows up and flips the script with her whole heroin chic look. Talk about a controversial figure. Was she just super skinny, or was there, like, more to it?
Right, so Kate Moss was like a total game changer. She wasn't just skinny, she represented this whole aesthetic that was like waif-like and androgynous, kind of fragile looking, you know?
Yeah.
It definitely challenged the like more traditional bombshell image of the time, but yeah, people were pissed off, you know, saying it promoted eating disorders and like unhealthy beauty standards.
So it wasn't just about the clothes, it was about the whole damn attitude.
Exactly. And speaking of attitude, we got to talk about grunge. It wasn't just music, it was a full-blown lifestyle. Ripped jeans, flannel shirts, Doc Martens, you know, it was like the uniform for anyone who, you know, wanted to like give the finger to mainstream fashion.
It's funny how grunge went from, like, underground to mainstream. Even my grandma was rocking a flannel at one point.
Yeah.
Probably with a scrunchie in her hair.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting, right? It was this rebellion against the really polished, preppy look of the 80s, but it was quickly adopted by the masses and commercialized, and then poof, you know, gone. It vanished faster than a Tamagotchi.
Speaking of preppy, did that whole thing just, like, disappear in the 90s? I feel like it was still, like, lurking around.
Oh, preppy definitely got a 90s makeover. It was less about that stuffy, like, country club vibe and more about a relaxed, casual take on, like, classic pieces. Khakis and boat shoes were still in, but they were styled differently, with a more laid-back attitude.
All right, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, hip-hop fashion. How the hell did that explode the way it did?
Hip-hop was massive in the 90s, and its influence on fashion was, I mean, it is undeniable, you know?
Yeah.
Baggy jeans, bomber jackets, baseball caps, you know, it became a global phenomenon. Think about artists like Tupac and Biggie. I mean, their style was iconic.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about the clothes. It was about the music, the attitude, the whole damn culture. It went from the streets to the runways, and everyone was trying to, like, get a piece of it.
Absolutely. It was a huge shift. Before hip-hop, like, high fashion was all about, you know, European designers and luxury brands. But hip-hop brought in this, like, totally new perspective, this street style sensibility that really shook things up.
Okay, before we move on, we got to talk about the hair. From the Rachel to the pixie cut, the 90s had some seriously iconic hairstyles. But let's be real, there were some tragic choices too.
Oh, absolutely. Remember those frosted tips and the butterfly clips?
Oh my God.
It was a time of experimentation, and some of those experiments should have stayed in the lab.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we've covered the basics from the Wikipedia article. Supermodels, grunge, preppy, hip-hop, and the good, the bad, and the ugly hairstyles. But you also sent over some excerpts from some other sources about 90s fashion. So let's dig into those, shall we? What else did you find lurking in the depths of the internet?
So these excerpts, they kind of go deeper into specific subcultures, which is where things get, you know, really interesting. Like one talks about the rave scene and its impact on club wear.
Okay.
It was all about, you know, bright colors, psychedelic patterns, and this like futuristic cyberpunk vibe.
Oh yeah, rave culture. People were going all out with their outfits. It was like a costume party every night.
Yeah.
Was it all just about, like, getting fucked up and dancing?
Well, the music was a big part of it, obviously, but it was also about, you know, rebellion, self-expression, and creating a sense of community. The clothes were a way to, like, stand out, to be different, and to embrace that whole rave aesthetic.
Okay, now for something completely different. Tell me about goth fashion in the 90s. Was it all black, leather, and angst?
Pretty much. Goth was huge in the 90s, especially among, like, teenagers who felt like outsiders.
Right.
Black was the dominant color, of course. But there were also, like, touches of Victorian and romantic influences. Think lace, velvet, corsets and, like dramatic makeup.
So it was more than just a fashion choice.
Yeah.
It was a way to, like, rebel against the mainstream.
Absolutely. Goth was and still is a subculture that embraces like darkness, individuality, and a rejection of, societal norms. It's about finding beauty in the unconventional.
Yeah. It's crazy how all these different subcultures, grunge, rave, goth, were happening at the same time in the 90s. What a melting pot of styles.
And each subculture like influenced mainstream fashion in different ways. It's like this constant exchange of ideas, borrowing and reinterpreting elements from each other.
Right, yeah. All right, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the rise of the supermodels, the grunge and hip-hop explosions, the preppy evolution, and the influence of subcultures like rave and goth, but I'm sure there's more to unpack. Let's take a quick break and then dive back into the nitty-gritty details of 90s fashion trends.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of some specific trends. Remember how we talked about Kate Moss and that heroin chic thing?
Oh yeah, that whole waif look. Was it just about being super skinny, or was there, like, more to it?
Yeah, it was definitely more than just, being thin. It was an aesthetic, a whole vibe. Clothes were often like oversized and loose fitting, kind of shapeless in a way.
So it wasn't all about flaunting your curves, like in the 80s.
Exactly, yeah. It was almost like the clothes were wearing you,
Yeah.
not the other way around. Think about those slip dresses that were so popular.
Oh yeah, those little black dresses, right?
Yeah.
Weren't those more of a 90s grunge meets glam kind of thing?
Yeah, you could totally dress them up or down. It was all about, looking effortless, like you just threw something on. And then you had those like oversized cardigans, chunky sweaters, and those long flowing skirts. It was all about comfort and a kind of a relaxed silhouette.
And what about those high-waisted jeans? Everyone and their mother was wearing those things.
Yes, the infamous mom jeans. They were everywhere. And they're making a comeback now, believe it or not.
Seriously. Mom jeans are back in style. I wouldn't be caught dead in those things.
Hey, fashion is cyclical, right? What's old is new again. Just wait. Those butterfly clips will be back in style any day now.
Yeah, I hope not. Okay, so we've got the waif look, slip dresses, mom jeans. What about shoes? What were people rocking on their feet back then?
Platforms were huge in the 90s. Chunky heels, platform sneakers. It was all about like getting that extra height.
Yeah, I remember those. It was like walking on stilts. Did guys wear platforms too, or is that just a girl thing?
Guys definitely wore platforms, especially in the the rave scene. Platform sneakers were like a staple for ravers.
That makes sense. You got to be able to like dance all night in those things. Okay, so platforms were big. What else?
Well, comfort was like a big theme in 90s fashion. Athleisure wasn't really a thing yet, but people were definitely starting to, embrace casual, comfy clothes.
Like sweatpants and hoodies.
Exactly. And tracksuits, those are huge, especially among the like hip hop crowd.
Yeah, tracksuits were the shit back then. I remember like wanting one so badly.
They're like a status symbol, And let's not forget about the accessories. Backpacks were massive in the 90s.
Those giant backpacks that could hold everything but the kitchen sink.
Yep, those were the ones, practical and stylish. And then you had the beanies, the bucket hats, and those baseball caps that everyone wore.
Or in the chokers. I remember those. Everyone was wearing a choker.
Chokers were a must-have. And don't forget about the body glitter.
Oh my God, the body glitter. I used to put that stuff everywhere. Was that just a rave thing, or did people wear it? I'm like, everywhere.
You'd see it at raves, concerts, and even like just out on the street. It was like the ultimate 90s accessory.
It's crazy how all these like little details are coming back to me. It's like a time capsule in my brain.
Yeah, and it's not just about the clothes and accessories. It's about the whole like vibe of the 90s. The music, the movies, the culture, it all like influenced the way people dressed.
Yeah, like how grunge music inspired that whole flannel and ripped jeans look, and hip-hop brought those baggy jeans and bomber jackets to the mainstream. It's crazy how those things went from like the streets to the runways.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a time of like massive cultural shifts, and fashion was right at the center of it all.
Okay, so we've talked about the trends in the U.S.
Yes.
But was 90s fashion like a global thing, or did different countries have their own like spin on it?
It was definitely a global phenomenon, but there were like, some regional variations. For example, in Japan, the 90s saw the rise of like streetwear and a more avant-garde approach to fashion.
So is that where like all the crazy over-the-top streetwear we see today came from?
It's definitely like a precursor to that. Japanese streetwear in the 90s was all about, bold graphics, oversized silhouettes, and this mix of high and low fashion. They were like really pushing boundaries and experimenting with new ideas.
It's pretty cool. What about Europe? What was happening over there?
Europe was like kind of divided. You had the UK, which was heavily influenced by Britpop and the whole, Cool Britannia movement.
Cool Britannia. What the hell is that?
It was this whole cultural moment in the UK in the mid 90s when British music, fashion, and art were like getting a lot of international attention. It was all about, celebrating British culture and style, thing like mod, haircuts, Union Jack motifs, and a kind of like retro 60s vibe.
Oh, like the Spice Girls?
Exactly. They were like the poster children for Cool Britannia. Then you had like France and Italy, which were more focused on high fashion and designer labels.
It's like the classic Parisian chic and Italian elegance.
Precisely. And then you had the rise of Scandinavian minimalism, which was all about clean lines, simple silhouettes, and a neutral color palette.
Scandinavian minimalism. That sounds like it could be straight out of like today's fashion magazines.
It's definitely still relevant. Scandinavian design has always been like ahead of the curve.
This is fascinating. It's like amazing to see how the 90s fashion landscape varied across the globe. Was it just about like geography or were there other factors at play?
There are definitely differences based on, age, gender, and subculture. Like we talked about how goth fashion was big among like teenagers, while preppy style was more popular among the, college crowd. And there were definitely like differences in how men and women interpreted certain trends.
Right, like men were more likely to rock those baggy jeans and oversized shirts while women were wearing the slip dresses and crop tops.
Exactly. It's like everyone was like putting their own unique spin on the prevailing trends, which I think is what made the 90s so interesting from a fashion perspective. It was all about individuality and self-expression. There was like no one right way to dress.
And I think that's what makes it such a like compelling era in fashion history. It was a time of like experimentation, rebellion, and pushing boundaries. And even though some of those trends might seem a bit cringeworthy now, they were all part of like creating this unique and memorable decade.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The 90s were a time of, bold choices, both good and bad.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the fashion journey.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here.
Yeah.
From those supermodels strutting their stuff to the global fashion scene, we've delved into this iconic decade. Before we wrap things up, what's your personal favorite 90s fashion trend?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But if I had to pick one, I'd say the slip dress. It's so versatile and timeless. You can dress it up or down, and it always like looks good.
Yeah, I can see why you picked that one. It's a classic.
Uh,
All right, what about your least favorite trend? Don't hold back. Let's hear it.
oh, that's easy. Frosted tips. They were just so bad. I don't understand how that ever became a thing.
I'm with you on that one. Frosted tips were a definite low point.
Mm.
Okay, so we've got the best and the worst. Now for a thought-provoking question. Do you think the 90s fashion scene will ever truly be replicated? Or was it like a product of its time, a unique and fleeting moment in fashion history?
That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both. Certain trends might come back, but they'll always be filtered through the lens of the present. So you might see it like a 90s inspired slip dress, but it'll be styled in a way that, reflects current fashion sensibilities.
So like a modern take on a classic look.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of fashion, right? It's constantly evolving, but it's always like drawing inspiration from the past. So
Yeah.
in a way, the 90s will always be with us, even if it's just in like subtle hints and references.
That's a great way to put it. The 90s might be gone, but their influence on fashion is still felt today.
And who knows, maybe in a few decades we'll be looking back at the fashion of the 2020s with the same mix of nostalgia and amusement that we feel now when we think about the 90s.
Oh, I can't wait to see what future generations make of our current fashion choices. It's sure to be entertaining. All right, let's wrap things up. It's been a wild ride exploring the 90s fashion scene with you. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's amazing how much we can glean from, looking back at past trends. It gives us a better understanding of where fashion is today and where it might be headed in the future.
Okay, so we've dug through the trends.
Yeah.
The subcultures, the good, the bad, and the just downright ugly. But did 90s fashion, like, really leave a mark on how we dress today?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The 90s were like a turning point. That's when, streetwear really started to gain traction and that influence is massive today.
So like those baggy jeans and oversized hoodies we see, like everywhere, that's all thanks to the 90s.
You got it. And that whole sneaker culture that's exploded recently, that has its roots in the 90s too.
Wow. I never realized how much of what we wear today is like connected to the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more than just, specific clothes. The 90s changed how people like thought about fashion. It became more inclusive, diverse, and really about personal expression.
So it wasn't just about like following trends like a sheep.
Exactly. People were like encouraged to experiment, mix styles, and create their own, unique look. And that attitude is still strong today.
So the 90s weren't just about like questionable fashion choices. They actually changed, how we think about fashion today.
Totally. It was a decade of innovation, rebellion, and self-discovery, and those values are still at the heart of fashion today.
All right, before we wrap up, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
If you could travel back to the 90s, what would you wear?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I'd go for a classic 90s grunge look, ripped jeans, a flannel shirt tied around my waist, and some Doc Martens.
Nice. What about me? What should I rock?
Let's see. You'd look great in a slip dress with a white t-shirt underneath and some chunky platform sandals.
Ooh, like the sound of that. Okay, I think we've officially covered like all things 90s fashion. Any last words about this glorious decade?
The 90s might be gone, but their impact on fashion is, I mean, it's undeniable. It was a time of, bold choices, creativity, and a whole lot of fun. And who knows, maybe some of those trends will come back. Fashion is a never-ending cycle, after all.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's a wrap on this deep dive into 1990s fashion. We hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane. And if you're feeling nostalgic, don't be afraid to embrace your inner 90s kid. Just maybe leave the frosted tips and butterfly clips in the past. Until next time, stay stylish.